At some point this offseason, a National League MVP will be crowned. Will it be Shohei Ohtani, the first DH ever to win it? Or does Francisco Lindor have a legitimate case? The internet will tell you he does. We'll dig into it. Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And thanks to those of you who are joining us live here on Thursday evening. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. So please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snyder. My co-host next to me, that's Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like most of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase lockedonmlb to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And Vince, you were just telling me before we started, you almost hit it big on Prize Picks. If what's his name? The receiver who
Zay Flowers.
If Flowers had caught that well, I guess we should say if he had gotten a little bit better pass on that second to last play of Thursday night's football game, which that's the reason we're going right now when we are, because we figured a lot of our listeners and viewers would be watching that football game. It was an exciting one, but we're here to talk about baseball. There was also some exciting baseball today. The Giants beat the D-backs in a walk-off double by Patrick Bailey. And then the Tigers also beat the Padres with some ninth inning heroics, full count, bases loaded, 2 outs, just like you dream about it in the backyard. And what's his name? Parker Meadows hit a grand slam to put the Tigers up 4-3. Tigers ended up winning that game. So Dodgers gain a half a game on both teams, even though they didn't play. So that puts them at 5.5 over the Padres and 6 over the D-backs right now, I think.
Yeah.
So that's good news. But like I said, the Dodgers didn't play today, but there's a lot to talk about. And we've kind of been putting this first topic off for a little while. It's been a big topic of conversation, but the Dodgers keep playing games. And so we're like, okay, next time there's an off day, we're going to dig into this. And that is the MVP race. We talked about it earlier in the season. Early in the season, it was Mookie Betts. He was the MVP. And then after Betts got hurt and Shohei Ohtani took off, we started talking about, could Ohtani really be the first DH ever to win the MVP award? And then it kind of got to where, yeah, okay, obviously Shohei's going to win. And now there's been a little pushback for a couple of reasons, partly because Francisco Lindor has been playing really well, and also because the Mets, Lindor's team, are fighting for a playoff spot. As of this moment, I believe they are tied with the Braves for the third and final wild card spot. And so, there's always that conversation of, the Dodgers have a high payroll, as if the Mets don't. But, without Ohtani, the Dodgers are still in first place. That's probably not true. But, without Lindor, the Mets aren't anywhere. And so we thought we'd dig into that a little bit. I have a bunch of numbers that I want to talk about. I'm going to try not to get too in the weeds, but I guess first, Vince, you have any burning thoughts on this topic of conversation?
Yeah, the most disingenuous thing out there right now is that the Dodgers would still be in the same spot if they didn't have Shohei Ohtani, which is like, if the Dodgers were 10 games up, 15 games up, maybe you could say, if the Dodgers didn't have Ohtani, they'd still be in first place. But realistically, with all the injuries that happen, regardless of what the team is, the team didn't have Mookie Betts for a long time. The team didn't have, Yoshinobu Yamamoto for most of the season. They didn't have Max Muncy for 3 months. Regardless of how you put the team now that they are starting to get healthy, that's not the team they had. So, would the Dodgers still be in the playoff spot without Ohtani? Yeah, more than likely. Would they be in first place? Potentially, maybe, probably not based on the actual stats, no, based on the definition of WAR, but it's just disingenuous to think that way. And really, I think the only reason that it is a thing is because, one, Mets fans are a loud minority and they, will always find a way to get themselves into conversation. But the other part is that there's not much going on right now. There's individual division races, but there's not really too much. Now we have Mets, Braves kind of fighting for one spot. Maybe, D-backs, Padres could fall back in there and give it a little bit of a race. But even in like the AL, there's not really a race. You know who's going to win. You know who's going to be in the playoffs. You don't know who's going to win the divisions. And that's really all there is. So, and in the AL, Aaron Judge is so far ahead of everyone else for MVP. So there's not really discussion because Cy Young is probably the best discussion in terms of some of these other awards, but there's not really any big names there. It's not anybody you're waiting to fight about. Like, no offense to Tarek Skubal, but like nobody's itching to get his name out there. And Emmanuel Clase is having a really good season. And, now he's maybe similar, I guess, in the sense of Clase, Skubal, Ohtani, Lindor in the sense of closer, DH, position player, starting pitcher. But yeah, anything beyond just wanting to make conversation, it doesn't make sense that Ohtani is not the MVP by a long shot right now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that same argument of, well, the Dodgers would be in first place with or without Ohtani also gets used when a player on a bad team is the favorite. Well, they'd be in the same place with or without him. They'd still be in last place. They could have finished last without him. And that's why I'm a firm believer that most valuable, what that means is the guy who played the best. And regardless of team, it's an individual award. It's not a team award. And, I saw somebody saying it's going to come down to if the Mets make the postseason, then it's Lindor's award. And, that means that if Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil and whoever the crap else is on the Mets plays better, then Lindor has a better chance of winning MVP, which is silly. It's an individual award. So it comes down to who plays better. That's the part where I do think that Lindor has more of a case maybe than people give him credit for. It's kind of interesting on FanGraphs, according to FanGraphs, where Lindor actually has the lead, which I was also noticing that according to FanGraphs, where you just mentioned Aaron Judge is running away with it in the American League, according to FanGraphs, Bobby Witt has a higher WAR than Aaron Judge. And so, I'm going to dig into that in a minute. I actually, just looking at the time right now, this one may stretch into a second segment, some of these numbers I've been crunching, but one of my biggest pet peeves about MVP races, Cy Young races, Hall of Fame voting is that it turns into, I could have included presidential elections, but I won't. It turns into, let me criticize the person I don't want to win instead of making the case for the person you do want to win. And you see it all the time. Like there are people who really think that Scott Rowland was a terrible baseball player because they don't think he should have been in the Hall of Fame. When really he was either a Hall of Famer or almost a Hall of Famer. People think Jack Morris, he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. And so like Harold Baines, same thing. These guys, he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. No, but they were legitimately great players, whether they got in deservedly or not. It's the same thing. Francisco Lindor, Shohei Ohtani, both having great seasons. Neither one, deserves to be denigrated. Like, this Shohei doesn't even play defense. Okay, so what? That's his current situation. It's not his choice. As you know, he would rather be out there pitching. So make the case, don't make the criticism of the player, I think. And so, let's take a quick break because then I do want to talk a little bit about the different versions of WAR because Shohei Ohtani leads in WAR according to Baseball Reference and Francisco Lindor leads according to FanGraphs, and they lead by exactly the same amount as each other, which means if you add the two up and divide them in half to get an average, they would be tied. So we'll dig into the case for each guy when we come back. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the kids. What do these have in common? You're probably buying a ton again this summer, but don't stress about the cost. Use Ibotta and get cash back on all your purchases when you stock up on all your summer essentials. Summer's drawing to an end, but there's still a few. It's not drawing to an end in Southern California. You probably need those flip-flops. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. You're going to be buying this stuff anyway. You might as well make sure you're beating inflation by getting cash back on it. The average Ibotta user earns $256 a year. That could cover the cost of a shopping trip, a plane ticket, a Dodger game, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including all your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash cashback and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Hey, we're back. Thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Please subscribe wherever you're watching and listening every weekday morning, or wherever you're watching or listening right now, to make it easier for you to become an everydayer by watching or listening every weekday morning. You can go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. It's a lot of fun. Text directly with us, get our thoughts. We're actually in our third segment. We're going to have a couple of questions from our insiders. This is kind of a semi-mailbag episode. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Sports LA is where you can find the Locked On Dodgers postcast, hosted by Pete Fox after almost every Dodger game. And remember, you can catch every pitch of every Dodger game on SiriusXM or the SXM app by searching for Dodgers. And for your second listen today, be sure to check out Locked On MLB, hosted by our buddy Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, covering all Major League Baseball. You can hear him talk about probably Parker Meadows' grand slam off of Robert Suarez of the Padres. I imagine that'll be a topic of conversation for Sully. So with that said, let's jump back into our Ohtani or Lindor conversation. And as I was saying, I believe MVP award goes to the guy who plays the best. And the problem here, the challenge in this particular case, is that they are completely different players. A lot of Francisco Lindor's value comes from the fact that he is a very good defensive shortstop. And Shohei Ohtani doesn't play defense at all. We had a similar conversation last year with Mookie Betts, who was playing a more challenging defensive position, second base and some shortstop, than Ronald Acuna, who was playing right field, which is one of the least valuable positions on the field. And at the time when their offensive stats were very close to each other, we were advocating for Mookie Betts to be the MVP. Then the last month of the season happened, and by the end of the season, Acuna's stats were much better than Mookie's because Acuna had a great September and Mookie had a bad September. And so by the end of the season, you and I both agreed that Ronald Acuna was the MVP, but we both agreed that defense matters. And so this year, the case for Lindor is 100% defense matters, because nobody, even the staunchest Mets fan, Francisco Lindor's abuela, nobody would say that Francisco Lindor has been anywhere near as good a hitter as Shohei Ohtani this year. Lindor has been very good. He's had a very good season. Nothing like Shohei Ohtani. So the question comes down to how much credit do you give him for playing defense when Ohtani doesn't play any? And that's a question that Baseball Reference and Fangraphs disagree on, which is why Baseball Reference says that Shohei leads in WAR. Fangraphs says that Lindor does, because they calculate defensive value differently. The offensive value, they agree. The calculations aren't identical, but they are close enough that that they basically agree. Everybody agrees that Ohtani is the better hitter. But Baseball Reference, even after factoring in defense, still says that Ohtani has been worth 0.7 wins more than Lindor. Fangraphs, after factoring it in, says that Lindor's been worth 0.7 more. And so I looked at the differences, and this is kind of an interesting thing, because for me, when it comes down to the difference between Baseball Reference WAR and Fangraphs WAR, I usually use Baseball Reference WAR just because it's easier to look up. So for shorthand stuff, but when they differ, which one I use depends on the purpose of what I'm looking at. Because if I'm trying to decide who is going to be a better pitcher next year, I will tend to use Fangraphs more than Baseball Reference. But if I was trying to decide who deserves the Cy Young Award this year, I would use Baseball Reference, because Baseball Reference is a more accurate representation of what happened when we're talking about the pitching side of WAR. Baseball Reference is a more accurate representation of what happened. Fangraphs is maybe a more accurate representation of what should have happened. How good is the pitcher? Because Fangraphs looks at, Baseball Reference just goes by runs allowed. Fangraphs goes by things like FIP and those things where it takes the defense out of the equation. But the fact is, if a pitcher has better results, then he deserves a Cy Young Award, even if you don't necessarily think that means he'll be better next year. On the hitting side, it's similar, not quite the same, but The main difference is that Fangraphs WAR uses UZR, Ultimate Zone Rating, for their defensive stats, and Baseball Reference uses DRS, Defensive Runs Saved. And when you look at the differences between those, I prefer DRS because DRS includes shift positioning. And so basically, part of the difference between the WAR for Lindor on Fangraphs and Baseball Reference is that Fangraphs is giving Lindor more defensive credit, whereas Baseball Reference and Defensive Runs Saved are saying some of Lindor's defensive value comes from where he's positioned. And so that's more of a team stat. So they get team credit for that, but not individual credit, because positioning is generally done by the team, not by the player. So there's that. There's also the fact that we know that defensive is important, but Baseball Reference and Fangraphs can't even agree on how important it is, because they do have positional adjustments where, just by nature of existing, if you are a DH, you lose about 1.5 WAR for the season because you're a DH. If you're a shortstop, you gain 3/4 of a win. And so the ultimate difference ends up being like 2.5, close to 2.5 wins difference for a shortstop versus a DH, but not exactly the same, because Fangraphs, the positional adjustment for a DH is minus 17.5 runs, and the positional adjustment for a shortstop is plus 7.5. So that's a total of 25 different. And in Baseball Reference, it's minus 15 runs and plus 7 runs. So a 22 difference, 22 versus 25. I'm trying not to get too in the weeds, but what that means is that little margin of error, when wars are that close, it could just be that they are guessing differently on how valuable that defense is. And one last thing that throws it off a little bit more is, it used to be kind of just the shorthand was 10 runs equals 1 WAR. Well, this year it's more like 6.5. Offense is down, all those things. And they haven't adjusted the positional adjustments. So while the run scoring, so now where 17.5 runs that you get docked for being a DH used to be about 1 3/4 wins, now it's closer to 3 wins, and well over 2.5 wins. And so they're not adjusting those things. Really, what I'm getting at is, when WAR numbers are that close together, you can't just say, oh, he beats him by 0.1 or 0.7. You got to look at it more. And the reason that Ronald Acuna won the MVP last year, the reason Aaron Judge is going to win the MVP this year, heck, the reason Aaron Judge won the MVP 2 years ago, is because of history. Ronald Acuna became the first 40-70 player last year. Aaron Judge hit 62 home runs 2 years ago. Shohei Ohtani is going to be the first 50-50 player. And so in order for anybody to deserve the MVP over him, they would have to be significantly better, or at least demonstrably better. And Francisco Lindor has been maybe better by some measurements. And that's not enough for me. Obviously, I'm wearing a Dodger hat and a Dodger shirt. I'm a Shohei Ohtani fan. Everydayers know I'm also a huge Francisco Lindor fan. I want Francisco Lindor on the Dodgers. I have for a long time. But obviously I am biased and I'm a bit of a homer, but I think my stance has been consistent that, if you make history, if you set a record, if you do something that notable, somebody's got to just really, really outplay you to get the MVP over you. Soliloquy over.
Yeah. I mean, I made my feelings known. If defense is your calling card over a significant offensive difference, then that really has to be platinum glove level. And Lindor's done it before, but I just don't think there's enough there.
He's not having a great defensive season. He has having a solid defensive season, not nearly his best. So yeah, there's nothing about his season that's historic enough to me to say, oh yeah, give him the MVP over this, no matter whether his team makes the playoffs or not.
I do hope the Mets make it over any of the other 3 teams that are right there. So
yeah. I wouldn't mind the Mets jumping in over somebody, but that's maybe rude of us because that means we're less afraid of the Mets. Is that what we're saying?
No, I don't like the Braves. I don't like the Padres, and I don't like the D-backs.
I get that. Yeah, I guess you're not old enough to dislike the Mets from 1988, huh? I still think of the fans at Shea Stadium cheering when Kirk Gibson messed up his knee sliding into second, and so I was a little angry fifth grader at the time. Now I'm an angry 47-year-old. So, all right, we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about Miguel Rojas's contributions to the team, and then we're going to answer one or two questions from our insiders. So, thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. You could win up to 100 times your money with PrizePicks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 watching your favorite sports. You can make a lineup of players across all different sports in as little as 60 seconds. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you are locked in. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5, even if you don't win. And get 4 weeks of free W's because 1 passing yard from Caleb Williams gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's Locked On MLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play 5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. We are back. Thanks again for being an everydayer. If you're not, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being with us live here on Thursday night. If you are, a lot of lively talk in the chat. Looks like there's some football talk, some Ohtani and Lindor talk, a lot of stuff going on in there. So thank you for that. Remember to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles on YouTube. Catch every pitch of every Dodger game on SiriusXM and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. So Vince, we haven't talked about Miguel Rojas in a while, and we feel like he probably deserves a little bit more credit than he gets sometimes. And after he got the big hit in that game against the Angels the other day, Mookie's 3-run homer put the game away. But in our 1980s baseball card stat, game-winning RBI, Miguel Rojas gets the game-winning RBI for that game on Tuesday because he drove in the run that put the Dodgers ahead for good. And it's only his second game-winning RBI. I've actually been tracking that stat in a Google sheet. Stat doesn't exist anymore, but the way it was defined in the 80s, I've been tracking it just for fun. And it was only Rojas' second game-winning RBI of the season, but we saw him bunt for a hit the other day, which isn't easy when you're not very fast like he's not. And then he took second on a fly ball, took third on a fly ball, and then scored. Like he manufactured a run, the kind of thing that Shohei Ohtani, part of the reason he's the MVP, those kind of things. So Miguel Rojas definitely has at least matched and maybe exceeded expectations this year, huh?
Yeah, definitely exceeded expectations. And really, when you go look back at his season, the only month he hasn't been above average offensively was July, and he got hurt towards the end of that month. But that month he hit 182 and had an OPS under 700. I think that's the only month. Yeah, he had an OPS just under 550, or under 580. So whatever it was in July, and I think that's probably when Mookie got hurt, so he started playing every day, and maybe that interrupted a little bit. But you look at every month, you look at last 7 games, last 30 games, last 15 games. You look at basically everything that's gone on this season, and he's been way better than we thought offensively. Combining that with the defense that we already know, that we've grown to love over the years in different stints. His strikeout rate's the lowest it's ever been in his career. His OPS is the highest it's ever been in his career, minus the 2020 season, where his 2020 season had some inflated numbers in terms of everything offensively. He had a 140 WRC plus that year, but he's at 107 this year. He's never been above 98 in any other year. So for whatever reason, he's figured out this year, whether it's health combined with, we talked earlier in the year how he went and played in the Winter League in Venezuela and looked pretty solid. And, maybe that helped him, or maybe that just meant he was healthy. Whatever it is, he's been good for the Dodgers in a few different ways. And, has legitimately played himself into a role in October, whether it's, playing shortstop every game, whether it's playing shortstop when the matchups dictate it, depending on righty or lefty, whatever the case is, if Edman comes into short. But for the Dodgers not having acquired a shortstop and for the Mookie Betts experiment to not, or Gavin Lux experiment first and then the Mookie Betts experiment not necessarily going how they would have liked, he's really been the savior there at shortstop and in the lineup a little bit.
Yeah, and this is 2 years in a row, basically, that Rojas has had to be the everyday or close to everyday shortstop for big chunks of the season. And yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that he has been better in the months where he has gotten a little more time off. But for me, it's the consistency at the bat that has been the most surprising. The defense, we expect him to be great. He's been a great defensive shortstop forever. We expected that. But, the other night on Tuesday night, Eric Karros didn't even get a chance to get the sentence out that Rojas is who you want up here with the runner on third and one out, because Rojas on the first pitch ripped a line drive to left field. But yeah, I mean, when you think about we need one run, there's a runner on third and less than 2 outs. If you're making a list of who you want at the plate, Rojas is much closer to the top than a lot of people might expect, because he does put the bat on the ball and he can get the ball in the air when he needs to. He's not going to hit a home run for you in that situation, but you don't need a home run in that situation. And so the ability to put the bat on the ball is really, really big.
And we know he's a veteran, and we know, he knew what his role was when the Dodgers traded for him, and even in this, coming year. But for him to, see Gavin Lux struggle so much at short and see the Dodgers bring someone in, or move Mookie over, I guess, to shortstop instead of just saying, hey, Rojas, maybe you can handle this. Obviously, it was a little bit more of an indictment on them trusting Lux in the bat more so than them not trusting Rojas. But, going to Dodger Stadium for, I went more in the first half of the season and seeing Rojas takes his defensive work every game, but Rojas was out there extra every single time, helping Mookie working on angles, working on throws, giving him, different suggestions. And to do all that at the, yes, you're a veteran, and Rojas at this point, maybe expected out of him and everything else, but just to kind of see that play out and see the success he's had on the field. Yeah, he's been, really great. And veteran presence means a lot more when you have productive stats behind it. And that's exactly what Rojas has done.
Yeah. And veteran presence, who knows how valuable it is. Last year at this time, there were people writing articles about how this Dodgers team is different because of Jason Hayward and Miguel Rojas and, all that stuff. And the Dodgers went out and got swept in the NLDS. But yeah, when it's backed up by playing great on the field, obviously being a great teammate to his, which is funny because there were rumblings about him not being a great teammate in Miami. But he's definitely been a great teammate to everybody in Los Angeles. And, you wonder if maybe, anyway, we don't need to get into that. But yeah, super happy for Rojas. And, it's been, now that they do have multiple other guys who can play shortstop, they can give him days off. They can play matchups a little bit and put him in the best chances to succeed the rest of the regular season and in the postseason. So that's pretty awesome. Let's jump into a question we got from one of our insiders. This one came from Steve in Bellevue, Washington. And he just asked IL Will Smith. And it's not that Will Smith is necessarily hurt, but being a catcher in September, something's always hurting, and we don't know if that's why he's been struggling lately. But it did get me thinking, we were talking a little bit about Dalton Rushing the other day. And if the Dodgers did want to find a way to get Dalton Rushing some at-bats and see if he is an option for the postseason, they're going to want to know if he can hit big league pitching before they consider him for a postseason role. And that would be a decent way to get him some at-bats if they did say, you know what, Will, take 10 days off. Nice thing about position players, it's only 10 days. And so take 10 days off and let's get Rushing up here and let Rushing start 8 games in 10 days and get him 40 at-bats. Obviously, this is all assuming the Dodgers could find a legitimate injury for Smith. We know they've been a little bit more cautious about the Phantom IL this year. But what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, it makes sense and looks great on the front side of things, especially with Smith. Like, Smith has been struggling for longer than just a little while. It's been more than half the season at this point where he hasn't been good offensively. And every time we try to hope that a 2-hit game or a 3-hit game or all the hard hit, and everything else is going to add up to what we want out of it. And we can't say for sure that's when it's going to happen. The fact of the matter is the Dodgers are able to move them down the lineup, and that's just a good spot at this time. The only thing I would, have issue with Rushing coming up and playing catcher is just if you want to see if he can hit, having him also play catcher may take away from that just a little bit in the sense of game plan. And as just from what we've heard from other people that catch, not necessarily, not saying that Rushing couldn't handle both, but there is a reason that offense is more at the premium at the catcher position just because it is a little bit more demanding. Now, it wouldn't be as demanding if you're just coming up and playing, for a straight week or whatever the case is. But having a game plan, the Dodgers have game plans. I'm sure they could even call pitches in from the dugout if they really wanted to, if that was the case. But I just worry about, okay, if you bring him up here and you have him catch, is he really focused on just hitting? And are you really seeing the true form of what he would be in October, which is a pinch hitter?
Yeah, and I totally see that. Although you also think about, if Will Smith continues to struggle, if Dalton Rushing was on the roster, he would be a legitimate option to start a postseason game there. You got a tough righty pitching, throw Dalton Rushing in there. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting thought anyway. We had a couple other questions from our insiders, but we'll get to those another day. Nothing too pressing. We knew that we had big stuff to talk about with Ohtani and Lindor. So I think that'll do it for us today. You got anything else for today, Vince?
No. If you are going to Dodger Stadium this weekend, have fun. It's supposed to be hot all through the weekend, man. So it's not like crazy hot, but the fact that we haven't had this heat all summer and now we're having it is just stay hydrated out there.
Yeah, it was nice weather when I was down there last week. So I'm glad I missed the heat wave. It's beautiful here where I am right now. So not to rub it in or anything, but yeah. But if you are going Dodgers, the Guardians are coming into town this weekend for 3. We will be back Sunday night to talk about that whole series. So yeah, that'll do it for us for this week. Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Thanks for being an everydayer. If you are, if you're not, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. You can make that easy on yourself by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. Remember, we're everywhere you get podcasts and on YouTube. You can also check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 2 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Sports LA is where you can find the postcast hosted by Pete Fox after almost every Dodger game. You can go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Text directly with us, one-on-one conversations, and get our thoughts before the podcast. It's just a few bucks a month with a free 14-day trial. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog. Both of our DMs are open there. You can also email us, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK, 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you Sunday night.
Have a good one.